Strieber, and today I am interviewing Marie D. Jones, who is one of our Dreamland hosts, our newest Dreamland host, but she's a writer too. And she's written a wonderful new book called The Resonance Key, exploring the links between vibration, consciousness, and the 0-point grid. Marie, welcome to Dreamland.
It's so good to be back. It's like my home.
Well, I think I know what resonance is. It's sound, vibration.
Right. Exactly.
But what I really wanted to ask you is, what in the world is the 0-point grid?
Well, what we did, I have to kind of lead into that. Larry, my partner, who we will eventually get on a show with me, but we wanted to lead into what we thought reality might be, what the infrastructure of reality might look like. But we started with resonance because we feel this might be the mechanism by which people are able, or objects or anything, matter, energy, is able to move between one level of this, what we call the grid, and others. The 0-point field, a lot of people have read about and heard about. It's a sort of ground state of all matter and energy and form, a sort of a repository field of all information, past, present, and future. But we don't like the idea of a field. When you think of a field, you just automatically envision something that is flat. To us, we felt like reality was more grid-like. It had so many layers, maybe even an infinite number of layers. And you can move about those layers, and perhaps we are already doing that when we have experiences like lucid dreams or deja vu or psychic abilities.
Or UFO experiences,
Absolutely.
Encounters with Greys.
Right, and not only can we move through those different levels, but so can all the other stuff that exists on those different levels of the grid. And perhaps that is why we get such fleeting glimpses of other realities. It's never quite consistent. I think maybe everything is trying to figure out what the mechanism is and trying to make it work consistently.
Now, by different levels of the grid, do you mean what a quantum physicist would call a different parallel universes?
That's one way of looking at it, different dimensions. I think when we look at our own minds, we have different levels of consciousness. So yes, that is a good way to put it. These could be parallel universes. We tend to use words that maybe are all-encompassing. To us, we like to say different levels of reality because we don't really know if they're parallel universes or other dimensions or other states of mind. I mean, these could just be other states of consciousness that we're not even aware we have access to.
And quantum physicists do say that we create our own reality, which is a very simple way of saying giving a complex idea. This sounds a lot like what the late Michael Talbot, who was a good friend of ours, wrote about in his book, The Holographic Universe.
Absolutely. I love that book. It was very fundamental to a lot of what I originally wrote about in science and what led into this, the idea that there is a whole universe, but there are also parts of it that mirror the whole, and that's how our brain may work as well. I think all of these concepts are all saying the same thing, but we're kind of choosing a little bit of different terminology to say them.
Well, just as a quick aside, since you know Michael Talbot's book, he came out to our cabin in upstate New York, where Whitley was having all the visitor experiences shortly before he died, and he saw the goddess in the front yard, and he thought she was someone selling squash.
Huh.
And we later saw the squash that she was purportedly selling in front of the vegetable stand of a local farmer, an elaborate design. Whitley wrote about this in one of his books.
Oh, it's all, there's a pattern, a blueprint, everything is connected. And what I really liked about Talbot's book is that he was so open to these cutting-edge ideas that we're now some of them are not so cutting-edge because we're kind of embracing them, and the scientific community is beginning to embrace them.
But we want to talk about your book, and in it, you talk about ghosts. What does this have to do with ghosts?
Well, we don't necessarily yet understand what, paranormal phenomena is, but when resonance suggests that if everything is vibrating and everything is vibrating at a particular frequency, perhaps when frequencies are matched, they can produce specific changes. They can produce different effects in the environment. Not only that, but they might change our perception. They may allow us to see things we don't normally see.
Like dead people.
Exactly. Or, anything, any kind of energy that exists. You look at an animal, you look at a dog or a cat, and they're constantly sensing things that we have no idea what they're looking at or hearing. And it's very normal. I mean, they see different parts of the light spectrum. They hear different parts of the sound spectrum.
They've discovered that flowers look different to bees because they have patterns on them that are kind of like landing strips that we can't see.
I think that's amazing. I think we humans get so arrogant about, well, this is real to me, and so therefore I'm going to ignore what goes on in the animal kingdom, and I can only see and perceive this, so nothing else matters, nothing else is real, and we really have to get away from that because there are wonderful examples out there of videos and images that you can look at that teach you the power of perception and how if you look at something one way, you see one thing. As soon as it's pointed out to you in a different way, you begin to see it in a completely different way, and you never can not see that again. It's like you just trained your brain to see something that was always there, but you didn't notice the first time around.
I think that's why people who have experienced the visitors tend to see them again and again, and why it's kind of a catching phenomenon that if a group of people are together and some people have experienced the visitors, other people who haven't are more likely to.
Exactly. It's almost like once that thought in your mind is opened up, it becomes contagious to the people around you. And this is something that Larry and I are writing about in our new book, which is really interesting, the idea of contagion.
Oh, really?
Contagious thought, contagious perception, how ideas and trends and different, even mass hysteria, if you think about it, operates on that same principle that one person's thought, one person's perception can literally infect the minds of thousands, maybe even millions, and not always in a positive way. I mean, we saw that, I think, throughout history. It's not always positive.
Well, Rupert Sheldrake writes a lot about this.
Right.
And he says that fashion designers especially have this problem because they try to keep their designs secret, and then they come out and everybody's showing the same clothes.
Yep.
And I know here in Hollywood, everybody's making the same films, even though they keep them under dark, deep cover, very secret. I mean, if you get a script from a studio, it's got personal markings on it, which identifies as the one they gave to you, so you cannot Xerox it. I mean, it's like the CIA hasn't got better protection than these movie folks, and yet I don't know if you've noticed it, but everybody seems to come out with the same films.
Absolutely, and I think for writers, it's it really can hurt sometimes when you think you found this amazing idea that nobody's written about. And you want to put it out there in the market, and you realize there's 25,000 other writers who just came up with that same idea. And I really think that whether we're talking the collective conscious or some sort of collective unconsciousness that's operating, our thoughts and our ideas and our perceptions literally come from a similar source. We all have access to that source.
It's like they're in the air or something, or it's time for them. I
think it was William Goldman, the screenwriter, who said that, maybe it wasn't, I might be ascribing this to the wrong person, but that, writers and artists literally grab ideas out of the air, but those ideas are floating around and available to everyone.
Sounds like something Goldman would have said, because he was so good. What he did was he just did it better.
Anything.
Yeah, he just did it better than anybody else. That was his solution.
But getting back to your question about the ghosts, what we learned, and this is research that's been available, just, like I said, we're not always aware of things, and once we are, we can never undo that awareness. There are particular frequencies of sound, mainly in the infrasound range, below 20 hertz.
I mean, that we can't hear consciously.
We don't. Some people are more sensitive to them than others, and what has been found is that Michael Persinger and other researchers have utilized stimulating certain parts of the brain, specifically the temporal lobe, with this level of vibrational frequency, and the result is that people perceive paranormal phenomena. They perceive apparitions, they perceive sensations of being touched or a presence being near them, they hallucinate. So there's something going on at that level of sound, and maybe a lot of what we perceive as being the paranormal world is always there. It's always in front of our faces. But we're not resonating at the right frequency to be able to pick it up on if we consider ourselves like a radio, we're not tuning into the right station to be able to pick that up. And once we do, though, whether we use infrasound or some other source to stimulate the brain, we, all of a sudden, that world is opened up to us. And we realize, oh, wow, that stuff has always been there. We just never perceived it.
I suspect that what's going on is that these vibrations and sounds are bringing up what are the gamma waves in the brain, which is the wave pattern in the brain, which makes people, this is a bit controversial, but it is a theory, that makes people open to what we might call paranormal perceptions. And if you'll notice, this type of thing goes on in religious and indigenous ceremonies, chanting, drumming.
Right,
it's been going on forever.
Absolutely. We call it paraconsciousness, and you can use hallucinogenic drugs and mushrooms and different plants to sort of stimulate the brain to seeing and perceiving things. You can use rhythmic sound, like you said, chanting, drumming. And what's happening is you're changing the frequency of your own body. Your own physiology is changing because you're hearing this particular frequency. And it just might be, as you said, opening up a part of your brain, a part of your mind, a part of your consciousness, whatever, to experiencing things that may always be there. We have a lot of people say, well, are you saying that this is all in the mind? Well, yes, but it's also physical phenomena.
Well, quantum physicists say everything is all the mind, but that doesn't mean it isn't physical.
Exactly.
And on that note, Marie, we're going to take a pause. Okay. This is a fascinating conversation. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Whitley Strieber's Dreamland Online with guest host Ann Strieber.
We're back with Marie D. Jones and her extraordinary book, The Resonance Key. And Marie, I know that you talked about, with William Henry a few weeks ago, about how sound may have been used to lift those heavy stones that built the pyramid. Now they know they were made of cement, but they were still heavy.
Right.
And also to build Coral Castle. Now, you mean sound could have been the secret of the Egyptians, that sound alone can lift these things?
It's one of many theories, and it just won't go away. And the reason why is because there are experiments coming out. I've even found a few on YouTube where people are levitating small objects, including, I believe, a frog and a mouse, using specific frequencies of sound. People think that sound is unimportant. We are so visually oriented in this society that we forget the importance of sound. And yet, if you are a religious person, let's say you're a Christian, or you believe in the Bible, the very first opening words of Genesis are, there was the Word, Logos, the Word, and from that all else sprang. And scientists say, well, the Big Bang made a huge sound, and all of those resonant frequencies created different things as they spread out throughout the universe, kind of saying the same thing. So the idea that sound waves can be used to lift a heavy object is becoming a little more acceptable. If you find the right frequency of the cement block, because it's not solid, that's what people have to remember. It's not solid. It's vibrating. If you find that specific frequency...
It's mostly empty space, isn't it? Like everything.
Exactly. And you find a way to manipulate that frequency using another frequency or a frequency that's similar, you can be able to lift it. And that, again, has been proven with sonic levitation in laboratory settings. It's been proven. NASA has what's called a sonic jackhammer that literally can drill through the ground without any kind of physical manipulation. It's using sound waves to literally drill holes into the ground. We see sound waves and frequencies being used now in healing, MRI. I mean, we see all of this kind of stuff, but we don't associate it with sound because we are so visually focused.
I wonder, you talk about some people being able to hear sounds that others can't. And we've put up quite a few articles over the years about hums.
Right.
In certain cities, there are hums that some people hear and some people don't, and they try to trace where they're coming from because the people who do hear them can't stand it. They can't sleep. They become nervous. Do you know anything about this?
I've heard of that, and I agree that I think that there are people who can predict seismic activity by, somehow.
Oh my, wouldn't they be valuable if we'd only listen to them?
But you know what? Nobody will pay attention to them because it's not a provable theory unless you somehow get them to predict every earthquake and volcanic eruption throughout history. But
they know that mice and rats can. And the Japanese actually keep pet mice and rats so they can predict earthquakes.
Absolutely, and it's not pseudoscience. When there is seismic activity, even leading up to the point of a massive earthquake or volcanic eruption, there's all kinds of movement going on that we're not sensitive to because it's happening in a different sound frequency range. Animals can pick up on it. That's why my ex-husband and I, the night before the Northridge earthquake, our cats were howling like coyotes. And my husband and I, we'd been through a number of earthquakes. We were driving to Pavilion's grocery store in Burbank, and we said to each other, something doesn't seem right. The angle of the setting sun is off. Something doesn't feel right. And, you can't prove that in a laboratory. You can't reproduce that. But we knew. We just felt off. It's like we weren't resonating in our usual frequency. But yes, people can hear sounds that others can't, just like people can have different perceptions from others. I'm sure we all agree that the color blue is blue, but we can't prove that everybody sees it exactly the same.
That earthquake information especially is fascinating because I know the front of the building we're living in now came off during that earthquake. Yes, and the building has always been rather strange. It's kind of all these creaky noises ever since.
Well, if you think about it, the ground is moving long before the actual, fracture that causes the earthquake that gets on the news. So there's a lot of ground down there that's bracing against each other and stretching and, it's moving. And my father and I wrote a book about supervolcanoes, and one thing that he taught me that just absolutely fascinated me is about harmonic tremor, which occurs when large bodies of magma begin to move beneath the earth, and they believe that this will happen before a supervolcanic eruption. When you have stuff going on under the surface of the earth, it's going to change not only the vibratory resonance of the earth itself, which we know has its own resonant frequencies, but the sensations in our body, if we allow ourselves to be tuned into those sensations, and I don't think most of us are. I think we ignore those little feelings where you feel like, oh, you know what? Something is just not right here.
Scientists call that intuition, and they are now seriously studying it.
It's about time.
Yeah, no, they really. I get all kinds of news press releases from science institutions, and I've got many of them where they're saying if you have an intuition to do something, to not do something, to not go down that street, listen to it. And these are people who are just totally grounded in what they would call reality.
Yeah, it's not woo-woo like it used to be, because we're now starting to understand that our bodies, our physiology is much more sensitive to our surroundings than we let ourselves think it is. And that information and technology has taken a lot of that away from us by focusing our attention elsewhere. But with resonance, what's really interesting is how it's infiltrated our human language. You say, I resonate with that person. Oh man, that guy gives me bad vibes. Or you go to a specific location and you just feel like the vibe here is off. Or you're on the same wavelength I am. I mean, it's in our language, so obviously on some level we understand the concept of matched resonant frequencies.
So in other words, if I feel good about a person I've met and I'm saying, I could be friendly with this person, it might have to do with vibration?
It could be. It could be that you are resonating at similar frequencies as that person. We talk a lot about thought and consciousness, and we now are really starting to understand that thought has its own frequency. And negative thoughts have different frequencies than positive thoughts. So if you meet someone who is just filled with negative vibrations,
you'll feel it.
You will feel it. Your body is that sensitive.
I've had that experience. I'm sure everybody listening has.
Right.
Do you know what's interesting is I once had an intuition about someone who we know, whose name will not be mentioned, but it was a beware, stay away from this person. It was just so huge. And later, this person completely messed up a project that we were doing that was very important to us.
You didn't listen to your intuition?
Well, I tried to tell everybody, but nobody else would listen to me.
That's the problem, is we've lost trust in our own ability to resonate and to have our intuition. It's sort of a lost talent that we're rediscovering. But I've had situations where I've gotten an intuition to not go in a particular area, ignored it, and found myself in some very dangerous situations and kicked myself later. Why didn't I listen to my gut? My gut always knows. Why? We're just so conditioned to ignore the unknown and the unseen. Yet it proves itself to us time and time again as being almost, well, maybe even just as real as our physical reality.
Well, I want to talk to you about a couple of other things you mentioned. One of them is HAARP, which is that installation in Alaska which people are railing against and say it's changing the weather, and I don't know what else all. And then the government says it's completely benign, and it's and of course neither side has the whole truth. But the question is, now that's vibrating, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's sending out high ranges of frequencies, and it's like a radio broadcast in a way.
What's it supposed to be doing?
It's supposed to be helping us detect, I believe, underwater targets using frequency and sound.
You mean enemy submarines?
Right. I think, the idea is to use
Does the enemy still have submarines? I mean, don't they just missiles now?
Yeah, really, whatever they're using down there. I mean, I think originally it may have been designed to have some defensive purposes, but the problem is, like you said, technology is allowing us to do that in a much less intrusive way, and in a way that doesn't necessarily put everything, I mean, not just human beings, at risk, because animals and insects and birds and all kinds of wildlife are sensitive to changes in resonant frequencies, whether they're in the air or whether they're in the water. We keep hearing about dolphins and whales that are dying and beaching themselves because of these sonic sonar tests, right, that the Navy is doing. So I hate to think that it's some kind of dark conspiracy, but I just think it's pointless. I mean, to me, it's just pointless that you have to go to that extent to try to locate something beneath the water.
It does seem very strange.
Yes, it does.
It does seem very likely that there is some other
purpose. And it could be, modifying the ionosphere, controlling weather.
Well, if they're trying to control weather, they're not doing a very good job.
No, not at all. Really. it could be some kind of
I think a dancing
weapon
Indian shaman could do better or something.
I think so. But yeah, and HAARP is not the only one. I believe there's 2 more in different parts of the world.
Oh, good. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's not the only one. I think there's one in Russia. Oh, God, I'm trying to remember. I write so many books, I forget what I wrote.
I write so many news stories, I forget what I wrote. And with that note, we'll take a break and come back, and I want to talk about EVP, which I have tried to do, not succeeded at, and I want to know if you ever succeeded. I want to know, first of all, what it is.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
This is Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. We go deeper.
Marie, what is EVP?
Oh, boy. EVP is electronic voice phenomena, and it's been around for a long time. The idea that you can capture sounds or voices from elsewhere, from other levels of reality, from ghosts, whatever you want to call it, on our simple audio recording devices.
In other words, you can hear voices that you can't hear with your ears, but if you take a tape recorder out and leave it on,
right,
when you come back, you'll hear people talking.
Exactly, and it's been around for a long time. It's gone by different names. The problem with EVP, and I've been in some, on investigations where they've done EVP, and I have never heard a darn thing.
It's kind of like what reverse speech. People say, well, he said this, and you said, I didn't hear that. But go ahead.
Right, and what I experienced was white noise and people perceiving different words out of that white noise. And it really was more fascinating to me to see how individual and collective perception was at work with EVP. Now, I'm not saying that ghosts and other entities can't make sounds, but why on earth would we not be able to hear them, but a crappy tape recorder would be able to pick them up? I'm not sure how that, came about. There are sensitive recording equipment that people are developing, but I think that you can find a pattern in anything. You can look up at clouds and find a pattern. You can look at wallpaper, if anybody still has wallpaper, and find patterns that other people may not see. And I think with EVP, the vast majority of it are people picking up words that perhaps they want to hear, and maybe the person next to them doesn't hear, out of that white noise. Now, I'm not going to discount it. I have actually heard a couple where I could hear words. But the next question I would ask is, where is that voice coming from? Is it a ghost talking, or is it a projection from one of these investigators onto
You mean
the
from
recording?
their brains?
Yeah. And I've even, with Larry, because he goes out on investigations all the time, we've talked about how do we know that what EVP, what you're picking up on these recordings, is not coming from the brains or the minds or the consciousness of the people on the investigation. You cannot prove that. In fact, you can't prove where it's coming from. And that muddles the whole field of EVP.
Well, it's very interesting from the many, many letters I've read from contactees. They all say the same thing about the visitors, which is that they talked to them inside their heads. In other words, they heard words, they heard clear sentences, but they were inside their heads. They weren't voice. They want audible voices. So this is perhaps one step in that direction.
Yeah, I can see that if you are hearing that voice in your head, perhaps we talked a little earlier about how thought has energy. We're learning that thought really has its own energy, and perhaps there's some way that you are projecting those words or little snippets of that conversation onto the recording device, rather than a ghost who's kind of floating around in the back of the room yelling out, hey, I'm here. We really can't prove that. And both lead to very fascinating conclusions. Either we're picking up the voices of the dead and other entities, or, wow, our minds have much more power than we thought. If we can project sound onto recording devices, what else can we do?
Well, I know several people can contact the dead and seem to have no trouble doing so. And they've done so in a way that convinced to me. So we can contact the dead.
Right.
And
right.
they do give them messages. They do say things that are very provocative.
And that could be, when you're getting a message, if you're doing an EVP experiment, perhaps it's you that's laying down that recording through your mind, through what you've received. Perhaps the mind is the receiver, and it's also the transceiver.
And therefore, we would have to get out of our left brain and into our right brain, and we would have to get into that gamma wave state. And we would have to, so that we could create so we could activate the receiver in our brains, don't you think?
We focused for so long on believing that, everything was either outside of us, that we had no connection to it, we had no part in our reality. And as we're learning more and more that we may have the biggest role of all, I think it's going to open up a lot of new research and ideas. I think it is all in our mind, but our minds are also somehow able to project it into manifest form.
It's not the same as saying it's our imagination.
Exactly.
Absolutely not.
It's different. Imagination is part of the mind, it's part of the mental process. But
it's one of the tools.
Right, exactly. Just like daydreaming or, whatever, creating a song or writing a book, coming up with an idea.
Imagination is a tool, but it's not an excuse for putting down what people have.
Oh, absolutely.
For dismissing what people have experienced.
Exactly.
Or for convincing them to limit their experiences or their realization of their experiences rather than exploring them.
Exactly.
Well, tell us, What have we not covered in your book? This is a fascinating book.
Well, we talk about everything from how resonance is used to heal, a lot of different healing modalities, using vibration, the light therapy, sound therapy, electromagnetic therapy, the idea that you can align frequencies of your cells with the frequencies of healthy cells. So if you've got diseased cells, there are machines that are being created that can possibly realign them to operate at the frequency of a whole healthy cell. It's, again, used in more negative ways with sonic weapons. LRAD was actually in the news, long-range acoustic device that is used by the police and the military to control crowds. I think it was used at the G20 conference.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was recently in the news, and I was kind of thinking, oh, wow, we wrote about that. So there's negatives, there's positives.
What does the weapon do? I mean, how does it stop people?
It sends out really awful frequencies of sound that literally debilitate people.
So like you're down on your knees holding your ears.
Make you feel like you're going to vomit,
At least it's kinder than tear gas, I guess.
It is, but it's scary. To think that somebody can use a sound frequency or a certain decibel range to bring you to your knees is very frightening. But at the same time, they can also use a specific frequency to heal you. So I guess everything has its positive and negative. But we also really look into what resonance has to do with reality and how we move around in different realities. If we can match up our vibrational frequencies with that of a parallel universe, if you want to call it that, that might be what's helping us get those little glimpses into that universe. And it also might be what's bringing what we like to call paranormal phenomena into our world. We're getting peaks into other levels of the grid, but it only happens when we're resonating at a very specific frequency, and we're just not consistent at it.
So the question has always been in the minds of contactees, for a better thing to call them, why me? Why did I have the experience and the guy sitting on the couch next to me didn't see anything?
They're vibrating on a different level. I think it's as simple as some people, their consciousness, whether it's their mind, their brain, and boy, is there still an argument as to whether they're all separate or one thing.
Yeah.
But it's just the idea that some people, we like to say some people are more open-minded, but what does that imply? It implies that their mind is operating on a different vibrational frequency that allows them to perceive things that another person can't. Just like when you look at those images of the old woman and the young woman, some people will automatically see the old woman, some people automatically see the young woman. But once you point out them both, everybody sees both. And I think what we're talking about is certain people can see and perceive and hear sets of frequencies that others just have not opened themselves up to receiving. And maybe they're just not capable. Maybe their brains have something, that will not allow that to happen.
But then I get letters from people who say, I want to experience the visitors. Show me how to do it. And I can't do that.
Here's your answer. I'm such a fan of the law of attraction. I read about it all the time. And I read about something called the law of paradoxical intent. I love this. When you want something really bad, you're never going to get it.
Oh, really? Oh, I love that.
The wanting creates a negative vibration that literally the desperation and the need. I love this because it explains why so many people use the law of attraction but don't get what they really desire. When you want something really badly, you're sort of setting yourself up for failure because want implies that you're never going to get it. You're constantly going to be attracting more wanting. So you have to adopt a different mentality and a different consciousness about it and open yourself in a different way where you're not wanting it, you're allowing it. And I just have been reading about this, and it has changed so many things for me. It's like, now I know why I couldn't make that happen in my life. The desperate clinging. It's like when you put water in the palm of your hand, if you grip it really tightly, you lose the water, but if you cup it gently, it stays in the palm of your hand. That same similar idea may apply to people who want so badly to see a ghost of their dead mother and reconnect with her. And maybe that negative vibration of wanting is what's keeping it from happening.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It's an idea, but I really embraced it. It's like, wow, that makes sense.
I just had an experience I just wrote a diary about where I had basically given up trying to find this one type of coat I was searching for, and then I happened to walk into a store for old time's sake that I used to haunt, and look, there it was on the hanger.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah, the exact color I wanted, the exact coat I wanted.
I think people need to get out of their own way and, follow intuition more. Keep the intellect out of it. Ooh, that's probably the biggest point. Shut down that left brain, and you will become more open to perceptions and ideas and even, physical things like people and opportunities and places that you weren't open to before. That doesn't mean you're going to be guaranteed to see a ghost or a UFO, but you'll be more open to it.
And if there's one around, you're more likely to see it.
Timing is everything. And also, we've got to look at the subconscious. If your subconscious does not believe, it's never going to happen. We know where the power is in our minds, and it's not the consciousness, it's the subconscious.
Well, Marie, it's time to take another break, and then we've got 12 more minutes. I'm very excited to hear what you're going to say next. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Whitley Strieber's Dreamland Online with guest host Ann Strieber.
We're back. Marie is resonance science.
People will probably look at the word resonance, the resonance key, and they'll think, well, this is science, resonant frequencies and how they operate in mechanics and engineering and physics. But the thing is that we can often find parallels with these concepts and how things work in the natural world with how they work in our own physical behavior, in our own minds even. And that's what was really exciting about writing the book, is that Larry and I really found a lot of ways that people can use resonance to help themselves live a better life. And you would not normally think that you could attach a sort of self-help angle to something that comes out of pure physics and pure science. But we're sort of realizing now that science and physics and quantum physics specifically have a lot more to do with human behavior than we think. So the idea is that if you can start learning to pay attention to how you feel and how your body reacts to other human beings, to different locations, to opportunities that are presented to you, you could probably avoid a lot of misery. I think we're all set up to recognize a positive resonant frequency. And when we don't, as we were talking about earlier, if we ignore our intuition or our gut instinct, whatever you want to call it, it usually leads us down a really bad road.
And we've all been down those.
Yeah, and we keep kicking ourselves, yet we keep doing it because we're so conditioned to follow the analytical mind. Well, this is, I should do this, and, I really should go to this event, and blah, blah, blah.
Or the mom mind in our brain.
Right.
Which Freud called the superego.
Or the monkey mind, which really just chatters on and has nothing important to say.
Instinctual.
Exactly. And it's just really exciting when you look around your own home and you think that you're looking at solid objects to realize that at the most fundamental level, that's not true. It also opens up a lot of really interesting possibilities for the future. I've had people say, well, if that's the case, we should be able to walk through a wall. Well, yes, we should. Theoretically, if we're not solid and the wall's not solid, if we could find the right resonant frequencies to get ourselves through the wall and then reconstruct them. No, we haven't done that. We probably won't in many lifetimes. But it is possible.
Many people have seen the visitors walk through walls. It's extremely common.
I always say to people, you've got all these people that talk to visitors or they go on investigations and they do EVP. And I always want to say, well, why don't you ask them? What's going on over there? What are the laws of your universe? How are you getting from there to here? I don't want to talk to my dead Aunt Julie as much as I want to know how she might be able to talk to me. What is the mechanism? And, we need to ask more of those questions and come up with more theories that can then maybe be put into different types of research, or whether it's in a laboratory setting or on a paranormal investigation. Obviously, there's stuff out there that we can't figure out where it's coming from.
There was a book out recently. I don't want to mention its name because I'm going to dump on it, but it had the theory, which I heard people, promulgating, that we're responsible for everything. In other words, if you have cancer, it's your fault.
Oh, yeah.
And, and basically you had the wrong resonance is what they would say to your book. They would say, well, you had the wrong resonance. That was your fault. You got that awful disease or that awful accident happened to you. And I just found this, rather repugnant. But somebody could twist this. They could twist your book to bolster that theory. What do you say to that?
Well, just because I think we have the ability to resonate to different things or use resonance to heal or to hurt doesn't necessarily mean that we were not born without some genetic disease. What it does mean is that if we can learn to understand the laws of resonance and how they apply to healthcare and holistic healing and vibrational therapy, maybe we can correct that. Maybe we can fix it. Maybe we can heal it. But putting the onus of the guilt on the poor person who is afflicted, I think that's terrible. And you hear that in the self-help movement and the law of attraction movement a lot. If you're not happy in your marriage, it's your fault. You didn't attract it. Whatever. You're to blame. It's ridiculous. My son has a disability. Is it his fault? Did he ask for that? Well, maybe. If you believe in reincarnation, some people believe that we bring into this life what we need to learn or deal with or handle or accept. But I agree with you. I think that that's really kind of a hostile attitude to take. You got cancer. You made yourself get cancer. No.
Or if you only kept your vibrations on the right plane, you wouldn't have gotten it.
There are a lot of ways people can get cancer. And yes, not eating properly or exercising or smoking or whatever.
Just having bad luck.
Exactly. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who has cancer brought it upon themselves because they were too stupid to know how to vibrate at the right level.
I'm very interested in, I know that Echo Bodine does hands-on healing and other healers put hands on people.
Right.
But I've never heard of sound, although I believe there are chants and things that go along with sand paintings that certain American Indian tribes have done as healing ceremonies.
Right, and also the use of different types of music, different sound ranges that affect the brain, soothe the brain, relax muscles, increase circulation. All those types of things are we're seeing more and more of them in the holistic healing movement. I think people know that when they hear sounds that are grating and loud and irritating, it doesn't make them feel good. But everyone hears a song or a certain, classical piece of music, and it just lifts them up, and it makes their whole day. It improves their mood. So we're taking that to the next level. If we can find the more harmonious frequencies of sound that work with the body to feel good and correct imbalances, we really won't need a healthcare reform because we'll all be able to take care of ourselves by using specific sound waves.
Well, there you kind of went back to say what those people say that you create your diseases there, Marie, now.
Well, I don't know that you create them, but why can't we use nature? I've always believed this. For every disease out there, nature has the cure. Except, well, what are we doing to nature? Raping and pillaging it and ignoring it. So I believe that you can have a disease. It's not necessarily your fault. But instead of turning automatically to traditional medicine, what do they call it, the slash and burn surgery or whatever, the idea that our bodies are built a certain way, they're precise, intricate machines, they're just wonderful, glorious things. And we might be able to use what's already here in nature, light, sound, color, to heal ourselves.
Well, we might, although I have to tell you, people who use that instead of going to the doctor make me very nervous.
Yeah, sometimes the two can work together. Sometimes you need surgery if you broke something or you broke your hip. But I think what we really are trying to do is finding a balance between what humans create intellectually and what we already know instinctively and intuitively.
Your best doctors are intuitive, too. Our doctor is very intuitive.
Right. And there are a lot of cases where taking a particular medicine will make you feel better. And all we can say to that is that maybe that particular medicine is what is creating the resonant healing frequency in the body.
Part of this intuitiveness is just experience, too. We have a good friend who's a cardiologist, and a fellow was checked in the hospital, and the head nurse said, well, this guy's going to die tomorrow. And the cardiologist said, nope, he's going to walk out of there in a week. And the cardiologist was right. Now, this was his intuition. Maybe his level, due to his level of vibration. It was also due to his experience. But it was basically instinct. He had instinct not to give up on that patient. We all better hope that we get a doctor like that when we need him.
I've had friends who have been told that they had terminal cancer and they were going to die within 6 months.
Huh.
And they did not buy into the quote-unquote power of suggestion. Again, suggestion is so powerful to people. Somebody can say that they put a curse on you and kill you if you buy into that belief. But why do you have to? Why can't you say, well, that's what you think, but I think something different. Doctors can sometimes have a real awful bedside manner. And when you plant in a patient's mind that they're doomed, you're helping bring about that doom much quicker.
Oh, yes. They always, nowadays, they've been doing this for years, but they monitor people's state, their state of mind.
Right.
And they write it down in that little chart they've got of you. And if you're feeling gloomy, they worry about you more than if you're feeling cheerful, whether you should or not.
Right. And we may not know necessarily that positive thinking can cure diseases, but if you are going to die, I think it's much better that your final days or months are spent with hope and feeling positive and trying to find some joy in your surroundings rather than already dying before your body does.
Well, it's very interesting. So all these things that we're calling intuition could be vibration.
Well, I think we're picking up on vibrations of our surroundings. It's like subtle energy. We kind of ignore subtle energy because we're so much in favor of in-your-face, big, bold, loud stuff. We're just so focused on that, especially with all this technology coming at us. The subtle energies just go in one ear and out the other, so to speak. But when you kind of stop to tune into that, you start to realize that you're always getting messages from your surroundings, from other people, from the universe, wherever, other realities. And it's up to you if you want to tune into them and see where they might take you. I think synchronicities are the perfect example of that.
Oh, yes. When you have them, maybe your tuning fork is working correctly.
Exactly.
And as I say, I just wrote a diary, which is about an incredible synchronicity that happened to us in New York City. So maybe our tuning forks were in the right place.
I think so. How many times do you ignore a potential synchronicity? What are you losing? What opportunity might you have just passed by because you pass it off as a coincidence or you didn't follow through? I hear people say that all the time, that they had a synchronistic experience, they didn't follow through on it, and then they have that what if regret for the rest of their lives.
Well, that's just amazing, and I'm going to try to keep my tuning fork vibrating because I have been inspired by my talk with you and by your book, and it's been Strieber, and today I am interviewing Marie D. Jones, who is one of our Dreamland hosts, our newest Dreamland host, but she's a writer too. And she's written a wonderful new book called The Resonance Key, exploring the links between vibration, consciousness, and the 0-point grid. Marie, welcome to Dreamland.
It's so good to be back. It's like my home.
Well, I think I know what resonance is. It's sound, vibration.
Right. Exactly.
But what I really wanted to ask you is, what in the world is the 0-point grid?
Well, what we did, I have to kind of lead into that. Larry, my partner, who we will eventually get on a show with me, but we wanted to lead into what we thought reality might be, what the infrastructure of reality might look like. But we started with resonance because we feel this might be the mechanism by which people are able, or objects or anything, matter, energy, is able to move between one level of this, what we call the grid, and others. The 0-point field, a lot of people have read about and heard about. It's a sort of ground state of all matter and energy and form, a sort of a repository field of all information, past, present, and future. But we don't like the idea of a field. When you think of a field, you just automatically envision something that is flat. To us, we felt like reality was more grid-like. It had so many layers, maybe even an infinite number of layers. And you can move about those layers, and perhaps we are already doing that when we have experiences like lucid dreams or deja vu or psychic abilities.
Or UFO experiences,
Absolutely.
encounters with grays.
Right, and not only can we move through those different levels, but so can all the other stuff that exists on those different levels of the grid. And perhaps that is why we get such fleeting glimpses of other realities. It's never quite consistent. I think maybe everything is trying to figure out what the mechanism is and trying to make it work consistently.
Now, by different levels of the grid, do you mean what a quantum physicist would call a different parallel universes?
That's one way of looking at it, different dimensions. I think when we look at our own minds, we have different levels of consciousness. So yes, that is a good way to put it. These could be parallel universes. We tend to use words that maybe are all-encompassing. To us, we like to say different levels of reality because we don't really know if they're parallel universes or other dimensions or other states of mind. I mean, these could just be other states of everything is connected. And what I really liked about Talbot's book is that he was so open to these cutting-edge ideas that we're now some of them are not so cutting-edge because we're kind of embracing them, and the scientific community is beginning to embrace them.
But we want to talk about your book, and in it, you talk about ghosts. What does this have to do with ghosts?
Well, we don't necessarily yet understand what, paranormal phenomena is, but when resonance suggests that if everything is vibrating and everything is vibrating at a particular frequency, perhaps when frequencies are matched, they can produce specific changes, they can produce different effects in the environment. Not only that, but they might change our perception. They may allow us to see things we don't normally see.
Like dead people.
Exactly. Or, anything, any kind of energy that exists. You look at an animal, you look at a dog or a cat, and they're constantly sensing things that we have no idea what they're looking at or hearing. And it's very normal. I mean, they see different parts of the light spectrum. They hear different parts of the sound spectrum.
They've discovered that flowers look different to bees because they have patterns on them that are kind of like landing strips that we can't see.
I think that's amazing. I think we humans get so arrogant about, well, this is real to me, and so therefore I'm going to ignore what goes on in the animal kingdom, and I can only see and perceive this, so nothing else matters, nothing else is real, and we really have to get away from that because there are wonderful examples out there of videos and images that you can look at that teach you the power of perception and how if you look at something one way, you see one thing. As soon as it's pointed out to you in a different way, you begin to see it in a completely different way, and you never can not see that again. It's like you just trained your brain to see something that was always there, but you didn't notice the first time around.
I think that's why people who have experienced the visitors tend to see them again and again, and why it's kind of a catching phenomenon that if a group of people are together and some people have experienced the visitors, other people who haven't are more likely to.
Exactly. It's almost like once that thought in your mind is opened up, it becomes contagious to the people around you. And this is something that Larry and I are writing about in our new book, which is really interesting, the idea of contagion.
Oh, really?
Contagious thought, contagious perception, how ideas and trends and different, even mass hysteria, if you think about it, operates on that same principle that one person's thought, one person's perception can literally infect the minds of thousands, maybe consciousness that we're not even aware we have access to.
And quantum physicists do say that we create our own reality, which is a very simple way of saying giving a complex idea. This sounds a lot like what the late Michael Talbot, who was a good friend of ours, wrote about in his book, The Holographic Universe.
Absolutely. I love that book. It was very fundamental to a lot of what I originally wrote about in science and what led into this, the idea that there is a whole universe, but there are also parts of it that mirror the whole, and that's how our brain may work as well. I think all of these concepts are all saying the same thing, but we're kind of choosing a little bit of different terminology to say them.
Well, just as a quick aside, since you know Michael Talbot's book, he came out to our cabin in upstate New York, where Whitley was having all the visitor experiences shortly before he died, and he saw the goddess in the front yard, and he thought she was someone selling squash.
Huh.
And we later saw the squash that she was purportedly selling in front of the vegetable stand of a local farmer in elaborate design. Whitley wrote about this in one of his books.
Oh, it's all, there's a pattern, a blueprint.